I'm going to make myself at home and move furniture. This way I can see you better. Let me say thank you for inviting me to come and be a part of this church's family today, to feel welcomed and to be able to share with you a greeting from Beaverton, who is the Executive Director of Wicked Compassion, also Carolyn Hamilton-Arnold, who is the new Associate Director, and Joel Cooper, who keeps us all organized and moving ahead as administrative assistant. And I am Mary Jacobs, and I have been traveling with Wicked Compassion in a new way for almost 20 months as Interim Resource Development Director, and it has been a gift to me, and one that I treasure. It's quite a journey when life turns upside down. And so I want to invite you to come and walk with me in the land of imaginative consideration, knowing that perhaps some of you may have had this kind of experience, and it is all too real. So I would like to invite you, if you wish, to close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and imagine with me. A tornado warning sounds. You gather your family, which may include a pet or two, and you prepare to head for the storm shelter. You stop and ask yourself, what if the wind rips through my home? What else might you take with you as you head through the door? An army who has the reputation of threatening lives or even ending them is marching towards your town. Their actions are known to be brutal. The soldiers are only a few miles from your home. You gather your family and prepare to leave as quickly as possible. What might you throw in a bag as you hurry from your home on that journey? You are a farmer whose crops have withered away. Drought has ravaged the soil for years, and once again only a few of the seeds you planted break the surface of the earth. Your family comes together and determines you all must leave if you are to survive. You must go where you can feed yourselves. What will you take with you on this road? Invite you to come back into this place, to open your eyes. What were some of the things that you, in your imagination, grabbed from your home as you were preparing to leave? Money. Pictures. Medicine.
Bread, water, and cheese.
Yeah. Bread, water, and cheese. Interesting.
Something to carry water.
Something to carry water.
Shoes.
Shoes.
Cooking pot.
Cooking pot.
Clothes.
Clothes.
Blanket.
A blanket.
The most important thing was loved ones,
Loved ones. Absolutely.
not things.
Not things. Nearly 60 million persons, half of them under 18, have been displaced from their homes around the world due to natural disasters, conflict or persecution, and famine. Some are displaced within their own country, while others find themselves moving beyond their borders. They leave behind everything that they've known as home: smells, sights, textures, sounds, faces. Yes, and the photos on the wall become only memories. They head out the doorway with only what they can carry, hoping and praying for a welcoming face. Will you join me in prayer? Holy One, open our hearts and our minds to your presence, for we ask for wisdom and kindness to flood our spirits. Teach us from within what it means to be refugees along the way to compassion and hope. Amen. The scripture that has guided our Week of Compassion focus this year is that reading from Ruth. If you remember the story, it is the story of Elimelech and Naomi and their two sons who find themselves surrounded by family, and they pick up and take every off from Bethlehem to Moab. And there, life turns upside down again, and Naomi has two daughter-in-laws, and Naomi has decided to go home. And one of those daughter-in-laws wants to go with her. And then you get that wonderful image of, don't ask me to leave you. I want to go where you go. I want to stay where you stay. I want your people to be my people. I want your God to be my God. So what might have Elimelech and Naomi and their two sons carried with them on that road from Bethlehem? Maybe it was a beloved wedding gift, or a favorite cooking pot, or a toy, a blanket. Famine forced them to pack what they could and leave their faith community and their home. And they walked across the border from the promised land to a different land. Now, Moab was known to be a place where enemies resided, and that's where they were headed. But they thought they ought to take that chance. Because, when our stomachs rumble with hunger, deciding who is enemy and who is not an enemy, it gets really low on the to-do list. Shelter and food rise to the top. A friendly face of any kind becomes a sign of hospitality and hope. And the Moabites let them in. And they create a home from the little that they have. And then, in a not too distant future, Elimelech dies, leaving Naomi alone with two sons. The sons grow up and they marry two local women. And life seems to settle back into a happier rhythm until Naomi's boys become ill and die. How is this woman still standing at all? Suddenly, three women are left to fend for themselves in a culture where male privilege prevailed and options narrowed very quickly for them. One daughter-in-law heads home, but Ruth will not forsake her mother-in-law. Don't urge me to abandon you, to turn back from following you. Wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Displaced and vulnerable, they get on the road together, seeking answers to basic questions. What will become of us? Where will we find food and shelter? Who will take us in? So they pack their bags and their broken hearts, and they head towards Bethlehem. What kind of welcome will this familiar friend and the Moabite stranger have when they arrive? What do they know together? They know this, that they will be on the road together. I remember the first time our congregation partnered with Week of Compassion and our refugee resettlement ministry to sponsor a group of refugees. Several of us went to meet them at the airport, and we took several cars because we wanted enough room for all their stuff. Silly us. Where they walked off with a sack in each hand. We waited at the gate for these 5 young men from Ethiopia. They had spent years making their way from conflict in their country to refugee camp after refugee camp to finally Tucson, Arizona. Several of us had made signs ready to hold them up when they walked out of the jetway. And as they walked through the door, their faces said it all. It declared their inner worries. Will we be welcomed? Can this be our new home? Will they be on the road with us? Seeing us standing there was a resounding yes, and their fear and anxiety dissolved into smiling Ethiopian faces. Ruth will not leave Naomi. She will not allow her to make the journey alone. With every word Ruth speaks to Naomi, she walks the path of human and holy solidarity. She embodies the accompanying Spirit of God. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. I will be with you. I will be Emmanuel. I will be an enfleshed promise to come alongside of you. By proclaiming that your people will be my people, Ruth embraces a call to identify with the other, the stranger, and claim them as more. The spiritual depth of solidarity comes fully alive in her final words of promise. Your God will be my God. In a world where promises are hurled in political epithets and the stranger is vilified, Ruth's words and actions calls us, you and me and disciples, congregations everywhere, to accompany our displaced sisters and brothers of global mothers on their long road to wholeness again, because we accompany them as God accompanies all of us. And we've seen their faces in newspapers and on our iPads and TV screens. We've been witnesses to their stories told on Week of Compassion websites. You have had your hearts go out recently to your own partners in Ecuador, through Fediche, because you know the people there, and you know how their lives have been turned upside down and displaced by the earthquake. And it draws you also towards your brothers and sisters in Japan, who have also been hit hard. We've heard their discouragement as countries close their borders, and our own Congress and state legislatures debate the worthiness of today's Ruths and Naomis. The refugee faces are young. They are mothers and fathers. They hold their babies in their arms, and sometimes they stand on beaches and retrieve their child from the sea. They are innocents running from gunfire and burning tents. They are elderly wondering if they have it in them to create a new home. Their faces declare the trauma. Their blanket-wrapped bodies standing in church fellowship halls project the weariness, and they speak Swahili, and they speak Arabic and Dinka and English and even Texan. We've seen their faces. I watched this December as familiar faces turned the First Christian Church, Rowlett, Texas, into a building where compassion was alive, where people were welcomed after a destructive tornado ripped through their community and touched down near the church. That was the congregation that rocked me as an infant and stood with me as I was baptized and welcomed me into the pulpit when I was first vice moderator of the church. I can visualize the fellowship hall where we ate together and shared stories after my father's death. I can remember the outline of the houses that have since been blown away. One story grabbed my heart in particular. It was the story of a husband driving home from work, hearing about the tornadoes, called his wife to see how she was, and as they spoke, the tornado ripped through their house, carrying her away to her death. Physical and emotional displacement of enormous proportions. And B, as executive director, called that church immediately to offer the congregation support as they offered compassionate welcome. And Carolyn Hamilton Arnold, not yet fully on the job, was there visiting family for Christmas holiday. And she immediately went to the church to meet with the pastor, to meet with the people, to encourage them and to say, there are solidarity grants from Week of Compassion on their way right now to make sure you can do the ministry that is needed. They were living reminders that Week of Compassion walks with them on this road. I invite you to listen to another person's story of what it means to be dislocated and away from home.
This is not my face, but this is my story. I am a Muslim woman from Afghanistan. My parents raised me to believe that girls and boys deserve the same opportunities in life, the same education, the same hope for the future. But there are people in my country at war with this idea. My family was harassed. My father was killed. My sister and I now live in the United States. We are seeking political asylum, trying to rebuild our lives, going to college, still dreaming of hope for the future. And Week of Compassion has been there, helping us every step of the way. Because my family is still in danger back home, I cannot put them at risk by showing my face. But make no mistake, I will speak out. I will tell my story, loud and clear. This is not my face, but this is the face of hope for a new future. This is not my voice, but this is the voice of thousands who are unable to speak. This is my story, one of the many stories made possible by people like you, people called to put compassion into action.
Week of Compassion, she reflects, has been accompanying her all along the way. And I just want to say, and so have you. We walk with her on a road to a new future. I understand that Bean Wynn stood here last year shortly after he began as executive director. Maybe you've heard his story, maybe you remember it, but let me remind you about it if you don't quite remember the details. He was 4 years old, and he was wakened in the middle of the night by his mother in a Vietnamese village. His mother lifted him up and carried him outside and placed him on the back of a motorcycle and whispered into his ear, "Hold on tight." And away they went into the night, he and his father. And they went from refugee camp to refugee camp until finally they arrived at East Dallas Christian Church in Texas, where he was accompanied from childhood to adulthood. His passion for this ministry, provided through Week of Compassion with the Displaced, comes from his own being dislodged from what was familiar and thrown into a refugee journey that included being accompanied by Week of Compassion. He knows what it's like to be the other, to need a family, to have people live out their understanding of God's accompanying presence. Last Sunday, Dee stood in a pulpit in a church in North Carolina. On Monday, I had a conversation with the pastor from that church, and she told me what he did for their congregation from his own embodiment of this ministry. He stood to preach, and he looked out across the congregation, a congregation that has been accompanying Hill people from Vietnam, refugees from persecution, who have been coming to North Carolina, and there are now about 100 that they have wrapped their arms around. And it hasn't always been easy, this journey, and he stood up to say, "I want to tell you that what you've been doing is so important, that you have welcomed these people into your life, and it is what is needed." And he said, "I remember because I was one of those teenagers that you sometimes watch run around this church building and wonder." He said, "I know it's not easy, and I thank you for being their family, for accompanying him in this journey." Accompaniment and solidarity claims our hearts and resources. Ministry costs. It costs us financially. It costs us personally when others dismiss us for living the gospel of hospitality and accompaniment. It costs us communally when we show up to walk with the other. We do this because of the one whom we follow. Jesus, our brother and refugee Savior, asked us to do it as though we were doing it for him. Your passion, and I know this congregation has passion for this kind of compassionate action in the world. And we thank you that you live it out in May and June and throughout the year. I want to invite us to give today because you can make it about justice, Justice, and not just us, Justus. Some of you have made deep, deep commitments to this ministry, and I thank you for going that extra mile. Compassion asks us to go where it hurts, says Henry Nouwen, to enter into the places of pain, to share the brokenness and the fear and the confusion and the anguish. We journey to this table every Sunday. We drink deeply from this cup of compassion. We know from the inside out what it is like to be accompanied. by the other. And when we drink from this cup of compassion, we declare, this cup of compassion holds the tears of the world. It holds the screams of war and the silence of the abused. It holds the bruised and battered lives turned upside down by disasters and human hatred. It holds the heartache of loss and the sting of rejection. It holds the crushed desire to be safe and at home. Our cup of compassion proclaims we will go where you go. Your people will be our people. We will be on the road with you. And we hold this cup close to our hearts, where the divine dwells, where hope is stronger than death and disaster, and where life-giving, resurrection declaring, abundant Jesus love overflows. May it be so, my friends. May it be so. Amen.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for your words. We're so proud of Week of Compassion.
And we're proud of you,
Thanks.
all of you.